Hails, minions and mortals, this is Fang von Rathenstein, lead singer of the most metal band on earth, the Lords of the Trident, and we are running 7 live streams every single month, including full band concerts, solo guitar shred sessions, and even classic Sega CD game playthroughs. So head on over to youtube.com/Lords of the Trident and twitch.tv/Lords of the Trident and subscribe. We've got a Patreon too, so check that out. Do it quick before Andy realizes he played the Lords ad and not the Lord ad.
You're back. Thank you so much for joining me on my little podcast, the Anti-Social Podcast. If you want to support this podcast, to keep it pumping, to keep it chugging along, come on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Support starts from only $1 a month, a little set and forget, a little feel-good payment, a little warm and fuzzy feeling that you can get from that. And there are additional tiers if you want access to the exclusive Patreon podcast episode that comes out every Tuesday morning, Sydney time, into your podcast player. You can use an RSS feed or into your inbox and you can have a listen to that as well. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. The money that I get from Patreon goes directly back into this podcast to keep it really simple. It covers the editing, podcast hosting, website hosting, the gear, everything. And it keeps me motivated to continue to build this podcast, make it bigger and better, thanks to legends like yourself who are already on Patreon and legends like yourselves who are about to join Patreon, if you get what I mean. Wink, wink. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Thank you very much. Ahoy! Welcome to the Anti-Social Podcast. This is episode 248. We are getting closer and closer to 250. Who will 250 be? Who knows? But this week's guest is a legend in the melodic rock space. If you are an AOR fan, melodic rock fan, more than likely you'll know who this guest is. If you don't, I reckon you'll know at least 1 or 2 of his songs. Stan Bush. Stan Bush is my guest this week, an absolute legend in the AOR melodic rock world. I've been a big fan for years. I've got a bunch of his albums and just a huge fan. I love AOR. I love lots of melodic rock hooks, Hook City, I usually call it. But Stan Bush is iconic in this space, and for people that aren't familiar with his name, you may know a couple of his songs. Stan Bush wrote and recorded, put out a couple of songs that were on the original Transformers soundtrack and were featured in the original Transformers movie. This is long before the big budget Transformers series that came out in the 2000s. This was the OG, the original, back in the late 80s. This is my favorite, by all means. And Stan Bush put out 2 songs that were on the soundtrack, Dare and The Touch, and the latter being probably his biggest hit. So if the names don't ring a bell, I'll put links in the show notes. You will no doubt have heard the songs before. And I'd be very surprised if you haven't seen the original Transformers movie as well. Go and check it out if you haven't. Highly recommended. Stan Bush has got a brand new album coming out in November of this year. So I think by the time this episode comes out, it may be November or very close. Dare to Dream. So you can go to stanbush.com. Go and check that out. Go and grab his album. It'll be on all the usual platforms to grab your music these days online, and you can also get the tangible stuff from stanbush.com. Lots of great stuff in this chat. An amazing musician, and just he can write a song. I tell you what, he knows how to write a hook. Amazing. So enough waffling on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Stan Bush. What's a day in the life of Stan Bush at the moment?
Well, I've been recording the album all this year, actually starting even last year. We did a couple of tracks. Like last summer, we did the single, The 80s, and with a music video and so forth. And so that's on the new album as well. But most everything was done this year on the album, and it's going to be released November 20th. So far, people that have heard it love it. So it's going to be good.
Has this year, or at least the last several months, thrown sort of the trajectory of the album out of whack at all, or has it all been sort of on track and everything's going okay? Fingers crossed.
You mentioned with the COVID?
Yeah, just everything, and no doubt. I mean, who knows? Like just getting people together, trying to keep on schedule.
No, actually, it's actually helped me as far as creatively, and my producer also. This whole year, he's devoted his full attention to working with me, so it's worked out great. It's win-win, you know. So in that regard, it's been kind of a plus, you know. But yeah, we were real pleased with how it came out.
One thing when I was putting together notes and trying to piece together sort of a timeline and all the different things you've been involved with over the years, like the common theme, which is, I think it might not be, you might not feel it's unique for yourself, but it's definitely unique from my perspective, where you've always sort of been in tune with publishing and trying to get your music into different places, not just your traditional, I'm going to put out an album, I'm going to put it out there, people are going to listen to it and enjoy it, and that's it. You've really sort of made that focus to sort of have the music in different places to really sort of maximize it. Has that always been sort of a thought right from the get-go that was a goal of yours to have your songs featured in different places?
Well, yeah, like I say, The Touch wasn't initially written for the Transformers, but that kind of kicked it off. It seemed like it got a lot of promotion from having been in the movie and associated with the Transformers brand. And and some songs like off the last album, we had Warrior that was used in video games and so forth, and a couple of TV shows. So yeah, that sort of thing does work. In the case of Born to Fight, the new song, it was written specifically for Netflix. And there are other songs like that have that theme where you have like fighting and winning and that kind of thing, and impossible odds, that sort of theme. And of course, some of that becomes more believe in yourself and go for it and that sort of thing. Just sort of general life kind of stuff where you're reaching for stuff that maybe you didn't think you could do, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Just everything across your career that I've seen as far as those big sort of high points where you've had certain songs featured in different places. It's that sort of underlying theme of sort of believing in yourself, fighting for something, striving for something has been sort of a common theme, at least from your perspective. I guess that's always been something that you're really passionate about and really sort of put a lot into.
Yeah, it's you're right. It has been kind of a general sort of theme. Every album, there are also love songs interspersed, but generally speaking, I do kind of lean towards that. It's sort of inspirational rock, if you will. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. It all started with The Touch. I don't know how I kind of just fell into that, but it's a little corny, but I think, you can make your life be what you want it to be. People don't realize that we really do have a lot of power, and it's channeling that and so forth. And sometimes you can overcome a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think you could.
Well, definitely helps if you can write your own soundtrack to your life. Like the rest of us get to enjoy the music that you put out, but you're writing your own, which is pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's funny like that, right?
What was it? I mean, going right back, I noticed that sort of late 70s, you're in a band called Boulder, I believe. And
correct.
And sort of starting out in music, was it the intention that you wanted to be part of a band, or did you already have sort of a vision that you were going to be sort of more of this solo artist where your name would sort of be the front of everything that you do? Was there sort of an intention at the beginning of your career?
No, I was always a band guy. Like I say, that band Boulder, we came out to LA from Boulder, Colorado, and did an album on Elektra Records, and that band broke up. And it just sort of worked out that way. We had like two guys that were kind of managing us, and one of them had a connection to the Equinoxe Studios. And we did an album, sort of a secret album project that wound up becoming the demo for the CBS Records deal that I got, Columbia Records. So then after that, I got another deal with Scotti Brothers, Epic, and that was the one that Scotti Brothers got the song in the Transformers movie, and from there it's but it's all kind of worked out.
Is it a case of sort of in those early days, especially when Boulder broke up, that there was a lot of hustling on your behalf to try and sort of keep everything going? Because if you're, as you said, you've always been a bit of a band guy. If that band, you've moved from Colorado to to LA, to get this thing happening. You got this contract, this deal in place. The band just doesn't happen. Was it a case at that time where you're thinking, oh geez, I've got to try and work out what my next steps are going to be? Was there a lot of sort of hustling that you had to do at the time?
A lot of hustling, a lot of freaking out, living in Hollywood, trying to figure out how I was going to pay my rent, selling gear, it was everything, a little of everything. But it, like I say, it worked out because I got in with the right people, at least to get in the door, and had management and so forth. But it was a process. The CBS deal, unfortunately, I had like a collection of a body of work I'd worked on for a few years writing, and I had like enough songs to make an album. But then, okay, album number 2. I think it happens a lot with bands. They don't have any new songs. They have to try to write a new album in 3 months or something, and it's hard to do. And of course, I was still developing at that time as a writer and so forth. So, but yeah, at the time, like I say, the Scotti Brothers producer heard me, the one who produced my record, Richie Wise, and he had worked with Kiss and a bunch of people, so he was good, and he knew his stuff and good song guy, and he hooked me up with real songwriters too. That was another thing. Before then, I had just worked on my own mostly, and but I started co-writing with people like Lenny Macaluso, who I wrote The Touch with, and also this new track, Born to Fight, was co-write with him. So I got the A team together.
For sure. I mean, it's right place, right time, and certainly probably the right place in the world to be as far as people creating music and collaborating and that networking space. I mean, I guess that's why stereotypically so many people move to LA over the years to try and make it and to try and make things happen. It's just it's a bit of a melting pot of creativity and hustle.
That's right. Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing in that regard. The business has changed a lot, obviously. Like after I made that second album, the Barrage album, and then the early 90s came and rock kind of imploded there, at least the kind of rock that I did, the 80s rock thing. And so I mainly did stuff in Europe and Japan during the 90s because that they still had a rock scene, and they liked the melodic rock, the 80s rock that I do. And so I didn't really change what I was doing too much. And, I went through like kind of a Henley phase. I was doing acoustic kind of music, and then I got back to my roots more when like the last 4 albums have been pretty. I really like what I've been doing with this producer Holger Fath. He's a German guy, my best friend, and he produced the last 4 albums, and he's great. He plays guitar and keyboards and really everything, and he helps arrange and come up with really good parts to make the songs work, and just really, I don't know, I'm really happy with working with him.
I think like anything, music comes in waves, and the different trends in the mainstream. But it's funny to watch how different markets, different countries all respond to music differently. And as you said, like sort of when I guess the Western world, or at least sort of the US and probably even down here in Australia, we sort of got swept up in that alternative music transition in the early 90s. But seeing, Japan, I mean, for me, like as a musician, we've been really lucky. We've had a great little career in Japan, and just been one of these little unique melting pots of dedicated music fans who just love hard rock and heavy metal and all of that. And Europe's the same place as well, where they've got their pockets of just dedicated music fans and they know their stuff as well. So I'm not surprised that you're working with somebody based in Europe who just understands how it all works and gets the best out of you as well.
Yeah, he's about 10 years younger than me, so he grew up in the 80s. Yeah. I mean, as far as musically, I was more of a 70s guy, and even late 60s. I mean, I was into music during that time, but playing bars in the South and all that growing up in Florida. So, but it's been a cool ride. I mean, the Colorado thing was a nice sort of introduction to the recording business, and I learned a lot of stuff about, how to record an album and how to write a song too. That's the thing I think that's the most important. I've developed, I think I've developed into pretty decent writer. I mean, I can't always get there, but I know a good song when I hear it, you know what I mean?
Well, I actually wrote it down as like a really sort of big, bold question to ask you at some point during this chat, I should say. What do you think makes a great song? What are the key ingredients? What do you sort of listen for, or even when you're putting together your own music, what are the sort of elements that are just non-negotiable, just have to be in there?
Well, I think something that is memorable, like as far as a hook, to me is important. Like that was one of the things about the 80s that was so great, because those songs, you just remembered them, like Eye of the Tiger, or, it's just a great, the big payoff line or something that sticks with you. You walk out of the movie theater singing the song, and that sort of element like wasn't as prevalent in the 90s and beyond, but it's sort of come back to a degree. And part of it's nostalgia, but I think a lot of it really is just what works, like the stadium rock thing. I always like that, the Power, Journey and Foreigner, that kind of stuff. I like that kind of music, and I always have. So, but I think really, let's see, just as far as my own writing, I try to, when I sit down, it's sort of like initially there'll just be like a music line, or maybe just a few chords, and then a melody that's I know it's cool. This is neat. I like it. So then I'll sort of keep playing that, and maybe find another chord thing to. The other thing with me, I like to be different. I mean, I don't want to do the same thing that. You know what I mean? There's so many songs that, that sounds like 10,000 other songs, the same. I mean, it's really hard not to do that, because you find stuff that works, but if you can get that twist, that where it changes keys or something. That was the cool thing about Def Leppard and bands like that. They'd have key changes and for the chorus or something, and then it would go back and musically interesting and that kind of thing. So that was one of the things I've always kind of strive towards,
I'm a massive AOR melodic rock fan. I feed off it. And I think for similar reasons to what you said before, where there's a little bit of nostalgia, but I think ultimately it's that hook. It's that. And you did it before, because for people listening, we're seeing each other on video, and you did the fist pump sort of thing in the air. It's that same sort of feeling that you get, that energy that you get from a big punchy chorus. But what you said then about the key change, there's nothing, I cannot think of anything better than a key change coming in towards the end of the song, where just when you think this song's fantastic, and then it just goes up a notch, and you go, oh wow, it's almost this euphoric sort of element that sort of caps off with this climax to the song, which is just it's absolutely incredible.
I agree. Yeah. Sometimes it just goes up a step, but I like when it totally new key comes in, it's like, whoa, it's like, it's pretty cool. It's unexpected, I think, is one of the cool things about it.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to sort of those earlier days in LA, and sort of going into this sort of, getting out of the Boulder scenario with your band and sort of working together with different people. I mean, what, if you can recall, how did your networking sort of approach work at the time? Because, I guess where these questions are coming from is me as a musician myself, and I'm always sort of thinking about how life is now for a musician. It's very different. Obviously, we're all connected on the internet. We can send emails and messages, and we can talk to each other really easily. But, being in LA and trying to, find people, and as you said, you were referred, or you were introduced to people to start working on songwriting, etc. I mean, what did day-to-day look like for you? Was it a case of meeting up with people at bars, or would you go down to studios and sort of meet up with people and try and just have a conversation with, and just try and work out sort of a way to sort of arrange a meet up with particular people? I mean, what did it look like?
Well, pre-COVID, you do that, go hear some other guys, network. I had this acoustic band. We haven't played obviously since March, but the bass player from Quiet Riot and the drummer from toured with America and a bunch of other people, and the guitar player, really good musicians. And we did like Zeppelin and just cover stuff, acoustic kind of bass. But it was, buddies of theirs would come down and sit in, and so it was kind of a scene, and but it is like that a lot of times. You meet people through other musicians and so forth. But you're right. I mean, it's getting out there, networking and so forth. It's kind of a lot of time I'm working on my own, though. I have this really great acoustic guitar that just sounds like gold, and I just sit in my room and just try to come up with new ideas. And I have to push myself too. Like some of these guys that can write like a song a day, like I'm not one of them, And also, like if I'm not really excited about it, I won't even finish it. I'll just like move on to something else. And so you have to. It's like this. I don't know. This level of perfection or something. It's whatever it is. But yeah, I don't really. It's a hard question to answer. Like what day to day. It's just obviously I don't do stuff every day, but I try to keep motivated, and I'm a self-starter kind of person, I guess. That's one of the things. You can't be like a bum, and songs just fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
I wish they.
I guess these days, and talking more so pre-COVID, because now it's completely different at the moment. But I guess
sure.
Even sort of earlier in the year or say last year would still be, I assume, be very different to what it was probably in the early 80s with you trying to sort of network where you were still forming these connections with people. You're still trying to build yourself up as a profile, getting reputation for yourself and people understanding who you are and what your talents are. So I would assume that extra hustle and the amount of networking that you would have had to do back then would have been a lot more than what you would be doing in later years. Yeah,
that's one of the things. The internet's broken a lot of barriers in that regard. You can have a music video that goes viral, and all of a sudden you're a known quantity, or I get like a song in a movie or a TV show that's popular, and I heard that, and you start to, after years and years of, building up those kind of credits and things. Like the first two Jean-Claude Van Damme movies I sang on, Bloodsport and Kickboxer, I had 3 songs in each of the 2 movies, and a lot of people that are like, martial arts they're into that stuff, and they heard those songs way back and around the time of the Touch, actually. But yeah, it's just, people know you from different things that you've done. And part of it's been like a building process, I guess, and people know that I'm, I'm not just one thing. For a long time, it was like, oh, he's just a Transformers guy. Anyway, but it's cool, but it's sort of, at least I think my style is pretty, it is what it is. And, got a few fans. It's cool though. It's, I do some of those conventions too, where I'll go to Transformers, and the kids, they want to hear the new records and that kind of thing. And sometimes I'll perform, but it's fun. Real nice kid, these people.
How have you adjusted to that over the years, where a lot of people may only know you from The Touch or even Dare, those big songs from that soundtrack? It appears to me that it's something that you've embraced, and even you talking about it, it's a world of its own. It looks incredible, like just the what do you call it, the conventions that they have and the fandom around it. It's really sort of heightened. But how have you adjusted to it as far as people just knowing you for that?
Well, that's the thing. If I go to a Transformers convention, there'll be like a couple thousand people, and they'll all know who that's Stan Bush. And then anywhere else I go, I can't get arrested. It's that kind of thing. But it's fun, It's I mean, for me, as I said, I'm a big melodic rock fan, so I've been relative. Not all of your back catalogue, but there's been touches along the way that I've certainly sort of been well familiar with your music, especially the Barrage album in full. There's so many tracks on there, and
whenever somebody mentions your name and sort of goes The Touch, I'm like, oh, you got to hear like the rest of that album. That is just like it's incredible. So I mean, I'm gushing a little bit, but that's one thing that I sort of thought about, and sort of for me, sort of being a musician and being in a band myself, about your identity as a musician, being a writer, being a creator, being an artist, and what sort of challenges there might be with people only knowing you for a very small section of your entire career, and how that sort of impacts you as yourself, as your own person and your identity. So it's interesting just to hear you sort of describe that.
Oh, well, just talking about my reaction to people caring about what I do, it's very gratifying. I don't think I deserve it, that kind of thing. It's, I try to be humble because it's a gift from God, to have, that, the ability to do something like this that you love, is really amazing. It's fun and awesome. And I don't know, it's kind of like a puzzle, too, when you're putting something together and you get into it, and I don't know, but yeah, as far as the fan thing, I appreciate everything that comes my way. I try to be as, because it really is awesome. And, people have been really wonderful to me for the most part. It's been a cool ride, I think, like I say, the new album, I'm very excited about it. To me, it's the best thing I've ever done. And, like I had the Barrage album that you mentioned, that's been my ultimate album for most of my career. It's like, oh, you'll never beat that one. And, that kind of thing. And then, like I say, the next, to me, the one that I did really well on also was, the In This Life. That was a really solid album. And then, I feel like I finally topped that, with the new one, Dare to Dream. So, anyway,
I'm excited to hear it, and especially for you to.
I'll send you a copy.
Oh, perfect. I love it. One thing that I thought was quite interesting with these high points in your career was getting Capture the Dream for the '96 Olympics. Was that sort of a real big high point for you, even in comparison to Transformers and all these other things? Like, I'm just assuming from being an American, having the Olympics in your own country, and then having a song that's linked in with this huge event would have been amazing for you.
Yeah, it was awesome. I flew to Atlanta and performed in the Olympic Village and all this, of course, the song was featured on NBC when the American swim team won all those gold medals. There was footage of, like a collage of footage of that stuff, with the song airing on NBC. It was really cool. And like I say, the only moment, I think one of the moments that would have been comparable to that was winning the Emmy, and that was actually the same year. The song "Till I Was Loved by You" was aired on actually CBS television, soap opera. And anyway, it was really cool. It got nominated, and then we won. My co-writer and I, and but it was pretty awesome. I never expected to win an Emmy award. It was best song of the year for television. It was the award was presented in 1997, and it aired in '96, so the same year as the Olympics.
Wow, such an amazing sort of period of time in your life to sort of have this music coming out, the Olympics, and then straight into like getting an Emmy, getting awarded this amazing achievement.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, it's kind of intangible, it's like one of those lifetime achievement things. It's it's not the be all end all, but it's something that's really cool that you can always be proud of.
Well, not many people get the privilege, so I think that's it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you.
With the Olympics, I mean, and getting this song sort of associated with the Olympics and sort of participating in it, how did that work? Was it just a case of the guys that you were working with at the time, they just, from a publishing point of view, just had submitted it through and you weren't aware of it and you sort of found out when it was accepted? Or was there an intention to sort of create a song for this? What did that look like?
we actually did write it specifically for that. The terms like "go for the gold" and those kind of things are in the song lyric. And it's funny, I sat down in the lyrics and I wrote down every cliche that I could think of, and and then kind of work. I don't know. It really did work though. But yeah, we wrote it specifically for that. And my co-writer, friend of mine, Mark Ferrari, he's a guitar player. He had a band back in the '80s too, and in the '90s. Anyway, he got it to the right folks, and to get it in there.
With the publishing perspective and sort of writing music for movies and TV shows, I guess the reality behind it for people, because it looks like you just strike gold all the time, like just to use the gold analogy before. But I would assume that's probably not the case. There's probably a lot of pitches that you do with the people that you work with. You write a song for something and you put it out there as a pitch, and it might not always hit. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, how often do you and the people that you work with write music and send it off in the hope that it gets picked up by a particular project?
Well, that's one of the things. It's hard to get out and push your music. It seems like more often I've had people come to me with like the Netflix person. He reached out to me. It's through my website. There's a stanbushmanagement.com or whatever email or at Gmail. But anyway, for some TV shows and things recently, it's been that kind of thing because, like I was saying before, you build up a reputation, and this guy, or whatever. And but I remember what you were just saying makes me think of when I did commercials. I was the voice for Toyota trucks and Coors beer and all this stuff back in the '80s. And I would make cassette tapes back then. And I mean, every 3 months or so, I'd make up 100 and something cassettes, and I'd send them out to all the music producers in town that did commercials, jingles. And, it was a grind. I would network. I figured out that if I got to be friendly or not, got to know some girl singers that they would help and I could help them, for recommendation, because, there's no competition. They either want a man or a woman or a girl or a guy, So anyway, but I had a lot of success, in commercials way back, and the 89, I did all the Coors beer and the Toyota trucks during the World Super Bowl in '89. I had 6 national commercials running at the same time, so it was good money.
I bet. That's pretty cool. With the cassette thing, I mean, just hustling and getting the cassettes out to different people. Was it a case that you were getting some studio time to quickly go in and get some takes down to put on cassette, or were you doing it from an apartment? I mean, what did that look like?
Yeah, I was just when I would use like clips from songs that I had already, or commercials that I'd already done, stuff I'd already sung on, and even if it wasn't a final, maybe just a demo for something, I would include it in they call it a reel. Yeah. So I'd have my vocal demo reel, and I would send out to, and of course the touch was on there too. I remember because I had done that by then. So, but yeah, it was good. It was a good period, during that time. And of course, like we were saying, the '90s came along, and boop, '80s music was gone. Mostly for the most part, they had all these. I don't know what happened, but just all of a sudden the grunge thing, came in, and rock was changed.
Oh, dramatically. During that time, were you sort of reconsidering where your spot was? I mean, obviously Japan and Europe still had this music scene that was happening that was still appealing. Like there was an appeal for the type of music that you play. But were you aware of that already? Did you already have the idea that you were going to focus on those markets, or was there a period of time where you sort of had to sort of think about, well, what does my future hold? Like I can see that the attention's shifting. Do I need to make changes myself, or do I stick to my guns and continue to do the music that I've been doing all the way along?
Well, I kept doing what I did. I couldn't really change who I was, so I just sort of, like I say, I was mostly just doing business in Europe and Japan, and like I say, it was a smaller scale thing. The first two albums were on major labels in the U.S. and big budgets and all that, but after that, and again, like you talked about before. The very first album was that Boulder album, and I didn't plan to go solo, but it just kind of happened that way. And especially once The Touch had come out, it was like, well, I could get in a band or get up a band, but I thought, well, I've already had a little bit of success as a solo artist, and it seemed like the natural progression would just be to follow that trajectory. So that's what I did, and it just kind of worked out that way. I don't know. It's a good question, though. It's like, what happened to Stan? Oh, he broke up.
Yeah, I guess I just know I'm familiar with Japan and Europe and their love of a lot of sort of melodic rock and hard rock and even heavy metal, just guitar-driven music, real sort of guitar-driven music and big hooks. So yeah, I'm interested to see, just to know or understand, I guess, what that was like when you made those decisions to start focusing on those other markets, because the US just was not what it used to be. So was it a case that people like you already had a relationship with those markets and you just continued to work with those markets, or was it a case that people from Japan were starting to reach out to you, or how did that work? Can you recall?
Mostly Europe, but yeah, I had already, like I said, I had made some headway over there. I had done some appearances and tours and so forth in Germany and England, and so I had a fan base there, and it was enough to keep going, Like I remember at one point I opened for Lou Gramm in Germany, and then I went back a few years later, opened for Survivor. Nice. So yeah, I toured with Russ Ballard, just things like that. And sometimes I would go on my own to perform. But one thing too that worked out well is if you're a solo artist, you can put together a band over there already, and it saves a lot of money as far as flying a whole band and all the gear. They could I just go over a few days early and rehearse with them, and then do the concert or the tour.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few artists, solo artists, do that and have made a real good sort of business out of it, where they can hook up with the right promoters, and the promoters can source the great session musicians who can get up and do these sets with these artists. So it makes sense, just to be able to fly 4, 5, 6 odd people, across the world. It's not cheap. So to have people locally, it makes sense.
Airfare, hotels, it's a lot cheaper. And in fact, I have a really good band in the UK. We've done like 3 things together so far. And the last time was in Germany. We did, it was November, a year ago, coming up, it'll be a year. We played at the Heat Festival outside of Stuttgart. Yeah.
Going back to songwriting, you mentioned songwriting before, and being sort of in the early 80s and getting hooked up with different songwriters to help you become a better songwriter.
Sure.
What did the process look like generally with some of these guys that you wrote songs with, where you're both collaborating and trying to put music together? What did that look like? Was it a case of bringing ideas to the table? Would you be there in person and you would have lyrics or a guitar melody or whatever it might be? Or was it different every single time depending on the person?
It's different. Sometimes you just sit down in a room with somebody else and a couple of guitars and, just see if you can bang something out. Sometimes one or the other will have like a kind of a start on an idea, and maybe they'll have just a hook, and they need to collaborate to finish the song. But yeah, I've couple times I've flown to out of town. People have flown in to write with me. I went to New Jersey and wrote with this guy named Jack Ponte. Jack Ponte had songs with like Bon Jovi, and also this band Skid Row. He wrote with them, and good writer. And also around that time, I worked with Jonathan Cain from Journey.
Yeah.
Journey had broken up at that point, and he was looking to start a new band, and it was just a possibility. We were going to check it out, and we wrote like 3 songs, and but he's brilliant, and so is another one I went to write with was Jim Valance from he wrote all the Bryan Adams stuff. It was like brilliant guy. I mean, him and Jonathan Cain. Something struck me about those guys is that they're brilliant. They're geniuses, really. But the thing about them is the work ethic. They'll work like 12, 14 hours in a day. It's not just we'll just try to bang out a tune in an hour, and then let's go to lunch or something. It's like they work. It's a work ethic thing, and you can see why they're successful. It's I learned a lot. It's worked with some really good people.
Did you do some writing with Paul Stanley? Did I read correctly?
Actually, yeah, it was through Kurt Cuomo. He produced a couple of my albums back in the 90s. And when I was, at one point it was a song that he and Paul Stanley had come up with, and I put my voice on it. And it was kind of a collaboration. I didn't actually sit down with Paul Stanley, but it was that kind of thing. It was like through Kurt.
Yeah, it's just wild to be able to work with so many different people, and no doubt, as you said, even with sort of Jim and Jonathan, like those guys, they're amazing songwriters in their own right, but they would be uniquely different as well with their approaches, just their personality, and just working with these different people. As you said, like learning a lot from them. Obviously, there's work ethic there, but even just from the craft of just building a song and putting together, was there certain techniques and things that they sort of do that you sort of went, oh wow, like I never thought of approaching a song that way?
That's a really good question. That's the other thing too, is it's hard for me to conceive of somebody writing a song if they're not themselves a singer. Mm-hmm. I mean, those guys could carry a tune certainly, but they're not like a lead singer. And I don't know. It's maybe they can intellectualize it more or something, and they don't have to rely on being able to vocalize everything. But I don't know. I mean, Jonathan Cain's, he's a really good, great solid background singer and all that. In fact, I even heard him sing lead on some stuff he had written. He played a couple of things for me that he'd come up with on his own. But I don't know. It's hard to, each song is different, so it's hard for me to really say what makes those guys approach, so special or important. It's just, I don't know. Jonathan Cain certainly hit, some of the biggest hits ever. Well, both of those guys, but I was funny on that Jim Valance. There was like one of the lines, melody lines in one of our songs. It had that same thing as like Bryan Adams. And it occurred to me that this guy, that he is Bryan Adams in a way, because he probably came up with the melody in the first place, So.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian would be just in some ways, in certain respects, just the face of the entire thing, whereas Jim's the motor underneath. Like he's got
right.
He's keeping the whole thing going.
Yeah, like Billy Idol and Steve Stevens, that kind of thing. You realize the real driving force. I mean, just from what I read and heard, But
I love
every day is different, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, I love the idea of that for those guys. I mean, Jonathan Cain, obviously, he was up there on stage and he had a big persona, like as far as being part of Journey. But those guys, I love the idea of working behind the scenes. I love that flying under the radar. I mean, they're crafting these things together, but they're not overly excited about being in the spotlight. They just they enjoy the craft of creating the song, and that's where their passion is. Whereas, there might be other people who are more the performer and they'd rather be on stage and have that energy of interacting with the crowd and being the center of attention. So I really love that sort of the mechanics behind it, working behind the scenes and sort of going, we're going to create something for somebody else.
Yeah. That's really true. it's so elusive too. I was talking about a song, coming up with something that's sometimes you'll love something, and then the next day you're like, I don't know. It's like it's one of those things. Whether something kind of withstands the test of time, and that sort of thing.
Were there any songs that you've written over the years that come front to mind where you didn't think much of them to begin with? So you've recorded them and like it's a good song, you don't mind it, but they've surprised you sort of as time's moved on, as far as they've aged well?
No, if anything, it's the other way around. Some of the ones I thought were really strong were maybe not as strong later.
Yep.
But the ones that I knew were really like real special. They remain so. Like that. I was going to say on that song on that album, the album In This Life, the last song, Southern Rain. That was one that was very special to me because I grew up in Florida and like I say. You walk out when you're a kid, you're in the rainstorm, and you're like, it's amazing. It's just. But it's not it's as much about the rain as it is being a kid again, so there's a, kind of a double meaning there. And I don't know. That's a real special tune to me. So
capturing that, that feeling of being there at that time and obviously an important time of your life being a child as well. So I guess it sort of captures a lot of different emotions and feelings. That's
right. Yeah. There's one at the end of the new album called Home, and it's a little bit like that too, where you've done all this stuff in your life, and you're like you want to go home. It's like we all have the yearning to go back. I mean, okay, it's not realistic, and it's never going to be the same because part of it is being a kid and growing up, and all that. But and they say you can never go back and all that stuff, But I think inside us, there's like a yearning a little bit, most of us, and like a salmon, wants to get back to where it came from,
I like that. I like that comparison. One thing though, I've definitely, and I'd be kicking myself if I didn't bring this up with you. So I've got some friends of mine from the US in Madison, Wisconsin, and they just recently, a couple of months ago, did a cover of The Touch. And
I heard about
Lords of the Trident, a power metal band, and I noticed that you did a retweet of it on Twitter. I've got to get your thoughts. I mean, especially for Ty and the guys in the band, I'm sure they'd love to get some feedback from you. What did you think?
Oh, it sounded great. Yeah, it was a really good version. Yeah. It's cool too. That song is a very cool song, and it's very gratifying that somebody wanted to cover it, and the version sounds really good. So
that's cool. I mean, there's so many.
I approve another.
Oh, there we go. There you go, Ty. He approves. That's good. I think. Just in your own career, that song has morphed and changed and had lots of different versions over the years. And then obviously people out there have taken on their own approach and their own renditions as well. So it's a song that on its own, I mean, even just excluding your entire back catalogue of music, there's so much stuff there. But that song alone obviously has had such a dramatic impact on so many different people, and continues to do so today. So it's great that people are still making the decision to record it.
I've gotten some amazing fan letters over the years about what that song's meant to people and how it's helped them overcome stuff in their lives. And one of the coolest things too was it was, used in the latest Transformers movie. The Bumblebee had the song, the pivotal, you got the touch, you got the power right before, it was a very cool, anyway, so
it's nice.
It's all good.
Yeah. It's nice to see that it's still going. Yeah. Well, what I'm going to do, for people that are listening is I'm going to obviously put links to everything in your world, Stan, so people can reach out to you and keep an eye on what's going on. Obviously, the new album is going to be coming out in November, and that's Dare to Dream. I'm going to put some links into some of the songs from your career that people may not be as familiar with. And no doubt most people will know all the stuff from Transformers, but I'll chuck a bit of that in there as well, just to just to make sure everyone's happy. But Stan, thanks so much for the chat. It's great to connect with you, and hopefully not the last time.
Really, my pleasure. I really enjoy talking with you. And yeah, people want to go to stanbush.com to see what's going on, and look for that Born to Fight single. Is going to be out soon, and the anime, Netflix. It's going to get a big push from them, so it's very exciting, and it'll be right ahead of the album coming out. So it's a very lucky sort of it all kind of came together. So, but yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed the interview. All the best, and thank you.
Hey, go and reach out to Stan. Tell him what you thought of this podcast. I'm sure he'd be stoked to hear from you. And go and buy his latest album. Go and support him. Grab his latest album, Dare to Dream. It's out in November. It should be out by now. If not, it'll be out very soon. Follow him on all the socials. If you're on the streaming services, follow him on there as well, and you'll get a notification. Go to stanbush.com. He'll have CDs and all sorts of other stuff available for his new album, no doubt. And I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Give him a little bit of anti-social love. I'm sure he would, I'm sure he'd love it. As with every guest that's been on the podcast, go and reach out to them. Go and say hello. Go and say, hey, I love your stuff. I love the chat that you had with Andy. You don't like Andy so much, but I love you. Whatever. Tell them. I'm sure they'd love it. They're dedicating a bit of time to cop an ear bashing from your mate Andy, and it'd be a nice way to give back. So yeah, if you do find someone that you enjoy listening to, go and say hello. Go and give him a little bit of a love. One other thing on the topic of Stan Bush, The Touch, the song The Touch. Now, the whole reason this podcast episode has come to be is because of one particular person, Tait Christian. Tait Christian from Lords of the Trident, who are based in Madison, Wisconsin. And Ty's been on the podcast previously. I think he was on a couple of months ago, so you can go back and have a listen to that episode. An absolute legend, really like a great guy and a great band. Now, Tait and the band put together a cover of The Touch, and they put it out online, did really well, and they put a tweet out on Twitter of the cover, and Stan Bush retweeted it. And I saw it, and I went to click on Stan's profile, and I realized that we're following each other. And I thought, oh, wow. And then I had this light bulb moment. Get Stan on the podcast. Wow. Okay. So a massive thank you to Tait for basically making this podcast happen. If it wasn't for you, maybe Stan would have come up on my radar down the track, because I've been a big Stan Bush fan. I'm a massive AOR fan. I've got a bunch of his albums, love his stuff, but just was not front of mind. And you certainly brought it front of mind with your amazing cover. So guys, go and check out Lords of the Trident, The Touch. There's a video on YouTube. Go and check that out, and I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the show notes over at andysocial.net, andydowling.net, and there'll be some clickable links in the description. After you go and say hello to Stan and go and support him with his new album, go and check out that Lords of the Trident cover. It is really, really good. Ty's one hell of a singer. Now, before we wrap it up, patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Thank you to everybody who's jumped on board so far. I know that I crap on about this quite a bit, but the money that I'm getting each and every week each and every month, I should say, monthly, has been huge. It's taken the edge off. It's taken the stress out of running a podcast. There's lots of expenses that come into doing a podcast. There's website hosting, podcast hosting. I pay for editing as well, just to take some of that edge off for me. Makes my job a hell of a lot easier. I'm upgrading gear, buying new things, and it's also helping me sort of open my mind up a little bit and be a little bit more inspired to get out of the weeds of stressing about finances, and actually being inspired and motivated to getting more and more fantastic people on the podcast, and also growing it, making it bigger, promoting it, adding little additional things to the around the podcast itself to complement it and make it bigger and better. So it is directly because of the people on Patreon that all of this is happening. So a massive thank you in particular to the people that are on my social circle tier, my $10 social circle tier. These guys are the big hitters. These are the guys that are significantly contributing to the podcast. Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto, Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton, Tim from Canberra, and James from Brisbane. And a special additional thank you to Patrick from Canberra, who has taken up my $20 I don't even know what the tier's called. I was going to call it a social circle tier, but I don't think it's even that. I think it's called We Need to Talk. I think that's what the tier's called. My $20 tier, it's a very cheeky tier that I put in there. There is no additional benefits in there whatsoever. It's just a case of me thinking, let's give people the opportunity to select it if they wish. And Patrick stepped up to the plate and thought, I wish. And he is supporting me with a $20 a month Patreon tier support thingo. And Patrick, thank you, mate. It is huge. You understand how it all works and you know how much of an impact this has. So a big, big thank you to you, and a thank you to everybody on Patreon. All the $1 tier, $5 tier, $10 tier, and of course, $20 is just huge. So thank you so much. Come on over and join. Anything above $1. You can do $1 a month. You don't get anything. It's just a little feel-good payment. And I'd love to have you guys on just even as a $1 a month payment. It'd be fantastic. But if you want to join and you want to pay a little bit more than that, you'll get access to a weekly podcast episode, an exclusive Patreon podcast episode every Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. You can copy the RSS feed, dump it into your podcast player, or you can listen to it straight out of Patreon. And it's just a bit of fun. It's some silly stuff. There's there might be a bit of karaoke in there. There's some things that I discovered throughout the week, some weird stuff, some fun stuff. I like to think that some of it's semi-informative. I think I'll leave that to the Patreon community to tell me otherwise, but there's a bit of everything in there. So come on over, join, have a listen to that if that floats your boat. And I'd just love to have your support. I'd love to shout out a few more people in future podcast episodes as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, we're done. Next week's guest is a musician, is a writer, and is somebody that has made a decision in recent months to help metalheads. And I'll leave it at that. Until next week, folks, take care and ta-ta. Larry.